At the core of every human mind lies a powerful need, the need to belong. From early childhood, we are wired to seek connection, approval, and acceptance from those around us. Psychologically, this is not weakness. It is survival instinct. In ancient times, being accepted by a group meant safety, protection, and survival, while rejection often meant isolation and danger. That ancient wiring still lives within us today. When someone approves of us, our brain interprets it as safety and reward. When they disapprove, it triggers discomfort and anxiety. This is why even small gestures of approval, a smile, a compliment, a like, can feel deeply satisfying. Social approval is not just about ego. It is about feeling secure in our place in the world. And without realizing it, we begin shaping our behavior to maintain that sense of belonging. Social approval activates one of the most powerful systems in the human brain, the reward system. When someone validates us, appreciates us, or acknowledges our presence, the brain releases dopamine, a chemical associated with pleasure and motivation. This creates a feeling of happiness and reinforcement, encouraging us to repeat whatever behavior earned that approval. Over time, this forms a pattern where we begin to associate our actions with external validation. The more approval we receive, the more we crave it. This is why compliments feel addictive and criticism feels painful. The brain does not isolate distinguish between physical rewards and social rewards. Both are processed as valuable experiences. This neurological response explains why people often go out of their way to gain recognition, even at the cost of their authenticity. Approval becomes more than a moment. It becomes a psychological reward we start depending on. If approval feels rewarding, rejection feels equally threatening. The fear of rejection is one of the strongest emotional drivers behind human behavior. When we sense disapproval, our brain reacts as if we are facing a real threat. This can trigger anxiety, self-doubt, and even emotional pain, similar to physical discomfort. Psychologically, rejection challenges our sense of identity and belonging. It makes us question our value and our place in social groups. Because of this, we begin to avoid behaviors that might lead to criticism or exclusion. We stay quiet when we want to speak. We agree when we want to disagree. And we adjust ourselves to fit expectations. This fear shapes our decisions more than we realize. It keeps us safe, socially, but it also limits our ability to be authentic. The desire to avoid rejection often becomes stronger than the desire to express who we truly are. Our craving for social approval is not only biological, it is also learned. From a young age, we are conditioned to seek approval through rewards and consequences. Parents, teachers, and society reinforce behaviors that are considered acceptable while discouraging those that are not. A child who behaves well is praised, while one who disobeys may be corrected or criticized. Over time, this creates a pattern where approval becomes linked to worthiness. We begin to believe that being accepted means we are good, and being rejected means something is wrong with us. This conditioning continues into adulthood through social norms, cultural expectations, and peer influence. We learn what is acceptable, what is admired, and what is rejected. Without realizing it, we internalize these standards and shape our identity around them. Approval becomes a measure of success, not just socially, but personally. Social approval plays a crucial role in shaping how we see ourselves. Our identity is not formed in isolation. It is influenced by how others respond to us. When people appreciate us, respect us, or admire us, we begin to see ourselves in that light. When they criticize or reject us, it can distort our self-image. Psychologically, this creates a feedback loop, where our sense of self is constantly being adjusted based on external reactions. We start building an identity that aligns with what is accepted and valued. This can be empowering when the feedback is positive, but it can also be limiting when it forces us to hide parts of ourselves. Over time, we may lose clarity about who we truly are, confusing our authentic self with the version that receives the most approval. And in that confusion, the craving for validation becomes even stronger. One of the strongest forces that fuels our craving for social approval is comparison. We constantly measure ourselves against others, their success, their appearance, their lifestyle, and their recognition. Psychologically, comparison helps us understand where we stand within a social hierarchy, but it also creates pressure. When we see others being praised or admired, we begin to question our own worth. We start thinking that approval is limited, something to compete for rather than something natural. This leads to a constant need to prove ourselves, to be better, to be more accepted. The more we compare, the more we feel incomplete. Instead of appreciating our uniqueness, we begin chasing standards that may not even align with who we truly are. This comparison trap keeps us dependent on external validation because our sense of value becomes relative rather than internal. And in that race, approval becomes something we chase, not something we naturally receive. In today's world, social media has amplified our need for social approval to an entirely new level. Platforms are designed to reward visibility, engagement, and popularity. Every like, comment, and share acts as a form of instant validation. Psychologically, this creates a loop where approval is not only desired but constantly tracked. You post something, then wait, then check repeatedly to see how others respond. This anticipation builds emotional dependence on feedback. Over time, your sense of worth can become tied to numbers on a screen. The more engagement you receive, the more confident you feel, and the less you receive, the more you question yourself. This environment encourages comparison, competition, and perfection. People begin to present ideal versions of themselves to gain approval, often hiding their real struggles. Social media does not create the need for approval, but it intensifies it, making validation more immediate, more visible, and more addictive than ever before. Many people fall into the trap of wanting to be liked by everyone. It feels safe, it feels comforting, and it gives a sense of universal acceptance. But psychologically, this desire is unrealistic and exhausting. Trying to please everyone requires constant adjustment of behavior, opinions, and personality. You begin to filter your words, hide your true thoughts, and avoid conflict at all costs. This creates internal tension because your authentic self is suppressed in favor of a socially acceptable version. The more you try to fit into everyone's expectations, the more disconnected you feel from yourself. Approval becomes a performance rather than a genuine connection. And the truth is, no matter how much you try, you cannot control how everyone perceives you. The need to be universally liked often leads to burnout and emotional fatigue. Real confidence comes not from being liked by everyone, but from being comfortable with not being liked by some. For many individuals, social approval becomes deeply tied to self-worth. Instead of seeing approval as external feedback, it becomes a measure of personal value. When others appreciate you, you feel worthy. When they ignore or criticize you, your self-esteem drops. Psychologically, this creates a fragile sense of identity because your worth is no longer stable. It depends on external reactions that you cannot fully control. This leads to emotional highs and lows based on how others respond to you. You may feel confident one moment and doubtful the next. Over time, this dependency can become overwhelming because you are constantly seeking reassurance. True self-worth, however, comes from within. It is built on self-acceptance, not external validation. But when approval becomes the primary source of value, it becomes difficult to separate who you are from how others perceive you. And that is where the craving becomes deeply rooted. Validation provides a sense of emotional comfort that is hard to ignore. When someone acknowledges your feelings, supports your ideas, or agrees with your perspective, it creates a feeling of being understood. Psychologically, this comfort reduces uncertainty and reinforces your beliefs about yourself and the world. It makes you feel seen, heard, and accepted. This is why validation can feel so powerful. It removes doubt and replaces it with reassurance. However, the problem arises when this comfort becomes a necessity rather than a bonus. You begin to rely on others to confirm your thoughts, your choices, and your identity. Without that confirmation, you may feel unsure or incomplete. This dependency limits your ability to trust yourself. While validation is a natural part of human connection, over-relying on it can weaken your internal confidence. True emotional strength comes when you can validate yourself, even when others do not. One of the hidden forces behind our craving for social approval is the fear of being judged. Every action, every word, every decision carries the invisible weight of how others might perceive it. Psychologically, judgment threatens our social standing and sense of belonging. We imagine negative opinions, criticism, or rejection, and this anticipation shapes our behavior before anything even happens. You may hesitate to express your ideas, hold back your true opinions, or avoid taking risks simply to protect yourself from possible disapproval. This constant self-monitoring creates mental pressure because you are not just living your life, you are managing how it appears to others. Over time, this fear limits creativity, authenticity, and personal growth. The need for approval becomes a shield against judgment, but it also becomes a cage. Because the more you try to avoid being judged, the less you allow yourself to truly be seen. Culture plays a powerful role in shaping our desire for social approval. Every society has its own standards of success, behavior, and identity. From a young age, we are taught what is respected, what is admired, and what is considered acceptable. Psychologically, these cultural expectations become internal guidelines that influence our choices. You may pursue certain careers, adopt specific lifestyles, or follow particular norms, not because they align with your true desires, but because they bring approval from family and society. This creates a conflict between individuality and acceptance. You may feel pressure to conform, even when it does not feel authentic. The more importance you place on fitting in, the stronger your need for validation becomes. Cultural approval can provide a sense of belonging, but it can also restrict self-expression. Understanding this influence is important because it allows you to question whether your choices are truly yours or shaped by the need to be accepted. Over time, the voices of others become an internal voice within you, known as the inner critic. This voice evaluates your actions, questions your worth, and constantly compares you to external standards. Psychologically, it develops from repeated exposure to feedback, criticism, and expectations. What once came from others now feels like your own thoughts. This inner critic pushes you to seek approval because it convinces you that you are not enough on your own. It creates a constant need to prove yourself, to meet expectations, and to avoid failure. Even in moments when no one is judging you, this voice continues the pressure. It keeps you striving for validation, even when it is not necessary. The challenge is that this voice often feels true, even when it is not. Recognizing it as a learned pattern rather than reality is the first step toward breaking free from constant approval seeking. Social approval feels powerful, but it is often temporary. A compliment fades, attention shifts, and validation that once felt meaningful quickly loses its intensity. Psychologically, this creates a cycle where you keep seeking more approval to maintain the same feeling. What satisfied you yesterday may not feel enough today. This is because external validation does not create lasting fulfillment. It provides a moment of reassurance, but it does not build a stable sense of self. As a result, you may find yourself constantly chasing new sources of approval, new achievements, new recognition. This endless pursuit can become exhausting because it never truly ends. The more you depend on approval, the more unstable your confidence becomes. Understanding its temporary nature helps you see that approval is not a foundation. It is a moment. And building your identity on something temporary leads to constant emotional fluctuation. Breaking free from the need for constant social approval is not about rejecting others. It is about reconnecting with yourself. Psychologically, it begins with awareness, recognizing when your choices are driven by validation rather than authenticity. You start questioning your motivations, asking whether you are acting out of desire or fear of disapproval. This awareness creates space for change. You begin to make decisions based on your values, not external expectations. It also involves building self-trust, learning to validate your own thoughts and feelings without needing constant reassurance. This process takes time, because the habit of seeking approval is deeply ingrained. But with practice, it becomes easier to tolerate discomfort, to accept that not everyone will agree with you, and to remain confident in your identity. Breaking the cycle does not mean you stop caring about others. It means their approval no longer defines your worth. One of the most powerful shifts in overcoming the craving for social approval is developing the courage to be disliked. This does not mean becoming careless or disrespectful. It means accepting that not everyone will agree with you, understand you, or approve of you. Psychologically, this requires emotional strength because it challenges your fear of rejection. You begin to realize that disapproval is not a threat to your survival, but a natural part of being authentic. When you stop trying to please everyone, you free yourself from constant pressure. You speak more honestly, act more freely, and make choices that reflect your true values. This courage creates a sense of inner stability that external approval cannot provide. It allows you to build deeper, more genuine connections with people who appreciate you for who you are, not for the version you perform to gain acceptance. To break free from approval seeking, you must redefine what validation means. Instead of seeing it as something that comes only from others, you begin to recognize your own ability to validate yourself. Psychologically, self-validation is the process of acknowledging your thoughts, emotions, and experiences without needing external confirmation. It means trusting your perspective even when it is not widely accepted. This shift is important because it reduces your dependency on others for emotional reassurance. You start listening to your inner voice rather than constantly seeking agreement from outside. This does not mean ignoring feedback, but it means not relying on it as your primary source of worth. When validation comes from within, it becomes stable and consistent. You are no longer shaken by every opinion or reaction. Instead, you develop a quiet confidence that allows you to navigate the world without constantly needing approval to feel secure. Internal confidence is the foundation that weakens the need for social approval. Unlike external validation, which depends on others, internal confidence comes from self-awareness and self-acceptance. Psychologically, it grows when you recognize your strengths, accept your imperfections, and trust your ability to handle challenges. This type of confidence is not loud or performative. It is steady and grounded. It allows you to make decisions without constantly seeking reassurance. You begin to rely on your own judgment, your own values, and your own sense of direction. Building this confidence requires practice, because it means facing uncertainty without immediate validation. You may feel uncomfortable at first, but over time, this discomfort transforms into resilience. The more you trust yourself, the less you depend on others to define your worth. And as that dependence fades, your need for approval naturally decreases. The journey of understanding why we crave social approval ultimately leads to one powerful realization. True freedom comes from within. When you stop depending on external validation, you gain control over your emotions, your choices, and your identity. Psychologically, this freedom allows you to live with clarity and confidence. You are no longer driven by fear of judgment or the need to be liked. Instead, you act based on your values and your understanding of yourself. This does not mean you stop caring about others. It means their opinions no longer control you. You become more present, more authentic, and more at peace with who you are. Approval becomes something you appreciate, not something you need. And in that shift, you discover a deeper sense of fulfillment that cannot be taken away, because it is not dependent on anyone else. Craving social approval is deeply human, shaped by our need to belong, to feel safe, and to be valued. But when this need becomes dependency, it begins to control how we think, act, and see ourselves. We start living for reactions instead of meaning, for acceptance instead of authenticity. The real transformation begins when you become aware of this pattern. You realize that, while approval can feel good, it is not a measure of your worth. True confidence grows when you trust your own voice, even in the absence of validation. Not everyone will understand you, and that is not your failure. It is part of being real. When you stop chasing approval, you create space to live honestly, connect deeply, and respect yourself fully. In that space, you no longer need to be chosen by everyone, because you have already chosen yourself, and that is where real freedom begins.